How do you provide relevant and insightful information to help prepare new trustees for their role on the board? In this video, we explore the different aspects of onboarding new trustees, whether for you or your colleagues. A common challenge among international schools is a significant turnover of trustees. Or perhaps there is a handful of trustees that are long-term residents, while others are perpetually transitioning in and out. Given the scenario where there's a turnover of trustees, appropriate strategies need to be in place for the selection and orientation of new people. In many schools, trustees are elected, but that doesn't stop the work of the board in identifying particular skill sets that are needed on the board, and the positive steps to encourage appropriate candidates to put themselves forward for consideration. In schools which are self-perpetuating, obviously there's much more responsibility to actively engage potential trustees to find the right fit. To compound the challenge, it's common for new trustees to take several months before they're able to contribute effectively and confidently in meetings. And if you've not already had a thorough induction into the operations of the board, then there'll be most likely areas of responsibilities that you have to work through trying to figure out what's important and why. And so again, you're not being most effective in your role as a trustee. Knowing this common challenge, how can boards help provide timely and relevant information to new trustees so that they do feel confident about the scope and operations of the board and are therefore able to be effective in their role? If you're watching this because you're part of the board responsible for bringing new trustees onto the board, or perhaps part of the administration looking for guidance on how to accelerate the preparation for new trustees, then you've come to the right place. But equally, if you're new to the role of being a school trustee and you feel a bit overwhelmed by the task and yet you feel you want to be more prepared for the discussions, then this is a good starting point for you. And yes, if you're a seasoned board member, but you feel you didn't really have a thorough induction into the operations and responsibilities of the board, then this video will still give you great insight into what information to start to pull together for your school. The topic areas included in the summary for new trustees are all covered in more depth in the respective videos in this series. In preparing new trustees for their roles, it's beneficial to have much of the background information prepared, probably as a document to read, and that can be used for a quick reference when trustees need to check the school's position or policy. However, there are dangers in assuming that this document is read, understood, and interpreted in the ways that's intended. And so an orientation meeting with existing trustees and the head of school is important. This meeting would commonly be with the chair and the head of school, or could include members of the governance committee if such a committee exists. That meeting would probably be very relaxed and would set the tone for future board meetings through being able to explore mutual expectations of the new trustee and the experienced chair, and allows for valuable questions and answers about the operations of the board. If there are standing agreements about trustee behaviour, these can be discussed, and in so doing paint a picture of effective and impactful trustee engagement and the bigger picture of the school's mission and values. So what might go into a trustee induction pack, and who would compile it? Well, typically the head of school has a good overview of the relevant background information and would arrange, maybe himself or through the administration, to compile all the relevant documents. But of course that's not to say the board would have no involvement, since there may be board operations and background that the trustees themselves would be in a better position to explain. Where boards have a committee dedicated to trustee recruitment, those people would typically have significant input into the documentation required. While new trustees may have some knowledge and understanding of the school, he or she is unlikely to have the depth and insight that will be required to make informed decisions and well-crafted questions. And so a comprehensive induction pack would give this background, as well as providing a point of reference over the coming months and years. If you're a current parent in the school, then it's likely you have a better understanding of the dynamics and operations that involve your children's year groups, but probably have limited insight into how the school as a whole works. And of course remember that your role is not to further your own agenda or benefit your children's classes, but rather to ensure the long-term success of the whole school, for your children and all of the children that are coming to the school that may not even have been born yet. A good starting point would be to compile some background information about the big picture aspects of the school, starting with the mission and guiding statements. This could include some insight into where the mission and vision and the guiding statements came from and how they were developed. The school's mission and vision are important, as these statements, along with any other guiding statements such as values or strategies, set out the stall for how the school is run and its direction. As trustees, you're the guardians of the mission and vision, and to ensure that they stay relevant and alive in the school. Mission, vision, and values don't change very frequently, but then again, they shouldn't be written in stone and never looked at again. These school guidelines should be used regularly by the board to inform decisions and to ensure congruence of the board decisions with the explicit directions of the school. And it will be your responsibility to ensure these guiding statements are relevant and are having the desired impact. Of course, the mission, vision, and values have been developed over time with links to the school's history, where its roots were planted, and where it is within its evolution. This will include information about the curriculum framework that's being used and the rationale for these choices. Knowing where the school is in its journey and the guiding statements would naturally link to any strategic goals and objectives. While the school's Articles of Association or its constitution might not be the most engaging read, these documents are nevertheless important for any trustee, and so they should be included in the pack, perhaps as an appendix. There are some operational aspects of the school and the board that also need to be included. So, for example, a contact list of other trustees along with particular focus areas that they may have. A brief bio and a photograph for each trustee would be extremely helpful for the new trustees to better understand the different perspectives that brought them to the boardroom. Similarly, contact information about the school's administration and their roles is useful, along with copies of organograms illustrating how the school's leadership and faculty are structured. This can help you, as a trustee, identify the right people that are in the organisation when you're having discussions, but also helps with some of the terms and nomenclature used in the school. Consider including something that documents the trustees' roles and responsibilities. So, for example, individual trustees, this could be thought of as a bit like a job description or a brief that clearly outlines the role of each individual trustee, as well as the expectations placed upon them. So you may be thinking, is it really necessary? And if so, what kind of things would go into this summary or job description? Well, first, let's consider your role as a leader of the school. Overnight, you've transitioned from a well-intentioned supporter of the school to suddenly holding a position of responsibility for the long-term success of the school. And as such, your decisions carry weight. You now have leadership attributes as well, where people respect your views and ideas, but we'll go into that later. Now, there will be times, particularly when creative thinking is required, where you may want to operate in a state of functional ambiguity. But for the most part, ambiguity leads to blurred lines and confusion. The written description, therefore, serves as a fix marker. Although the induction meeting with the chair is probably a good time to discuss in some considerable detail the board's norms and essential agreements, with a particular focus on what it takes to be an impactful trustee, maybe rather than simply following or what's being modelled currently. An important inclusion would be the school's policies. Some schools have a policy manual that gives all of the details of the school's operations, whereas others separate policy from procedure. The advantage of separating policy from procedure is that the school's policies should be a function of board deliberations. Where policy and procedure is combined into one document, then it can become a challenge to manage all the minor revisions that require the board to sign off on. So, for example, there may be important operational aspects, such as how the children are dismissed from assemblies or how notice boards are supposed to be mounted, that the trustees will have little or no insight of. This would then be time-consuming and frustrating for board members to devote energy on such minutiae when there are more important strategic issues to look at. So by separating policy and procedure allows the board to set broad directions while the school's leadership and administration can work out the finer details. As a trustee, you'll be responsible for the policies, but should also have oversight of the detailed procedures and therefore will need access to both of these critical components. As you skim through these, ask yourself, when were they last reviewed and updated? Trustees are expected to retain confidentiality, and yet it's also desirable to be transparent with the stakeholders. So how is this possible to achieve both of those seemingly opposing drivers? Clear trustee guidelines might allude to the need for lively debate in the boardroom, but a cohesive message once decisions are made. Trustees are also required to declare any conflict of interest that may arise, but should also sign a standard conflict of interest statement annually. The importance of the relationship between the board and the head of school is highlighted in standards of accreditation and is the focus of a separate video. So at this point, it will be useful for new trustees to have some information about how the two roles are distinct and the expectations of the relationship. There may, for example, be some sort of a term of reference or memorandum of understanding in the board pack, but it's good to have a reminder about this in the summary. It's important to be clear about the board's role is ensuring the long-term health of the school, setting the mission and vision, approving tuition fees and the annual budget, and of course, appointing the head of school. The actual responsibility for the day-to-day operations is a function of the head of school and administration, not the board. These trustee guidelines can go further and outline broad levels of responsibility and the timescale. So, for example, elected positions typically have a time frame for the appointment, whereas a self-perpetuating board may have a different criteria that they look at. It can also highlight the expectations of trustees in terms of time commitment. For clarity and lack of ambiguity, the description could include the fact that trustee's position is not paid and lay out any conditions required to reimburse expenses. Given that the board's duties and responsibilities are quite broad, how will a trustee know if they're successfully carrying out their duties individually and as a board? How is success defined? So this summary is an opportunity to highlight strategic goals for the school and those that may be particularly relevant to the board, or board goals and the need for trustees to reflect critically on their own individual contributions, as well as the functions of the board as a whole. Finally, the trustee guidelines or the job description are an opportunity to reinforce some of the positive messaging about the benefits of being a trustee, that the discussions and decisions will have a significant impact on the school's long-term future, and that satisfaction can be felt by contributing and collaborating to make a positive difference in the community, even though the timescale to fully realize the impact that they're having may be beyond their actual tenure on the board.